This is the Double Edge Factor, where high performance meets peace of mind and faith meets focus. I am your host, Rod Manuel, and peace and blessings unto you. Before we get going, be sure to like, follow, and hit that subscribe button, because the more positive interactions you put out there, the more they push this podcast to people who've never heard it before, which, of course, will allow us to grow, reach new ears, and have a greater impact on more people around the world. And if you want 2026 to be the year that you perform and live at your highest level, head on over to rodmanuel.com. That's RODMANUEL.com. Join that email list and remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Last week, we talked about a man who leads must first lead himself, and the double-edged message was, looking composed, productive, and respected means nothing if your body, mind, and soul are quietly deteriorating behind the scenes. Private neglect will eventually expose itself in public consequences. So, this week, we will be taking on the subject of, if your blood pressure is high, so is your responsibility. Blood pressure. It's one of the simplest metrics you can track. Takes less than 60 seconds to measure. There's no complicated equipment. There's no expensive testing. No waiting on results. Yet, it remains one of the most ignored indicators of health among men. Why is that? Because it doesn't scream for your attention. It whispers. Unlike an injury that stops you in your tracks, high blood pressure often develops quietly over time. You can feel normal. You can still go to work. You can still exercise. You can still perform your responsibilities. There may not even be any pain, no obvious symptoms, right? No moment that forces you to stop and say, hey, man, something is wrong. And that silence can be very deceptive. Because while life appears normal on the outside, internally, the body is under pressure. Your blood vessels, they begin to experience constant strain. Your artery walls, they're gradually becoming damaged. The heart muscle, it actually works harder than it should, thickening over time. Your kidneys, they begin to struggle with filtration. The risk of a stroke slowly increases. All of this can happen without a single dramatic warning sign. And here's the reality. Many men simply don't know their numbers. Not because they don't have excess, not because they lack resources, but because they never took the time to even check. And that's where responsibility enters this conversation. Leadership requires confrontation. Leaders do not ignore metrics that matter. Put it to you like this. If you owned a business and your financial reports show warning signs, you would investigate that immediately. If your engine light came on, would you ignore it? Most definitely not. Yet, many men ignore one of the most important metrics related to their own longevity. If you refuse to measure your blood pressure, you are choosing ignorance over responsibility. And choosing not to know does not make the risk disappear. Strength is not pretending everything is fine. Strength is having the courage to look at the numbers and respond accordingly. Avoidance feels easier in the moment, but ownership always produces better outcomes. Stress, sodium, and sleep. That's the real recipe for hypertension. It doesn't appear randomly. It develops through patterns of stress, patterns of behavior, patterns of lifestyle. Several factors consistently influence blood pressure levels, and many of them are deeply connected to how we as modern men live. Chronic stress, poor sleep, high sodium intake combined with the low potassium consumption, lack of consistent physical activity, and increased visceral fat around that midsection. When these elements combine over time, they create the psychological environment where blood pressure begins to rise. Let's start with stress. When the body experiences stress, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. This system is designed to protect us in moments of danger. Heart rate increases, blood vessels constrict, blood pressure rises to deliver oxygen and nutrients to your muscles quickly. In short bursts, this is this response is healthy, but when stress becomes constant, when urgency never turns off, the system says it stays activated far longer than it should. The body begins to live in a constant state of pressure. And this is what that means. Elevated heart rates throughout the day, tighter blood vessels that remain constricted, and consistently elevated blood pressure. Now, combine that with poor sleep. Sleep is one of the body's most powerful recovery systems. During deep sleep, the nervous system shifts towards restoration. Your blood pressure naturally starts to drop, your hormones rebalance, and the body repairs tissues and regulates your metabolism. Now, when sleep is shortened or disrupted repeatedly, that nightly reset never fully occurs. And the result is a cumulative stress on the cardiovascular system. An excessive sodium intake and limited potassium from whole foods like fruits and vegetables, and the body struggles even more to regulate fluid balance and vascular tension. So over time, that pressure starts to rise. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people don't want to hear this, but you cannot pray away poor habits. Faith is powerful, but faith also calls for stewardship. Stewardship means taking responsibility for how you care for your body, the body that you've given. If stress remains unmanaged, if sleep remains neglected, if movement remains inconsistent, then blood pressure will eventually reflect all of those choices. Your bloodstream reflects your lifestyle, not your intentions, but your actions. All right, Hezekiah. Hezekiah was a king who became severely ill. The prophet told him his time was near, so he prayed. He turned his face to the wall. He sought God sincerely. God extended his life, but notice this. The illness wasn't ignored. It wasn't denied. It wasn't confronted. And you see, leadership they don't pretend that sickness isn't there. They actually should be addressing it. When conversations about health happen, people often move towards anxiety instead of action. But anxiety doesn't solve the problem. Action does. So instead of worrying about the possibilities, start with simple steps that can help you create clarity. So this is what I want you to do this week. Begin by purchasing a reliable home blood pressure monitor. These devices are widely available, affordable, and easy to use. Take a measurement in the morning, shortly after you wake up. Then you can take another one, say in the evening. Do this consistently for 7 days. Write those numbers down. Track your patterns. Patterns matter more than isolated readings. And I'm only telling you this because I'm telling you from experience. Next, I want you to begin small adjustments that support cardiovascular health. Reduce those heavily processed foods that are typically high in sodium and low in nutrients. Increase your walking and general movement throughout the day. See, movement improves circulation, it supports metabolic health, and it also helps regulate your stress. Next, protect that sleep. Protect your sleep as if it were an investment in your future performance, because it actually is. And if your readings remain elevated, consult a physician. Go to a doctor, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. Seeking guidance is not a weakness. That's actually wisdom, my friend. See, strong leaders don't gamble with things that matter most. And right now, longevity matters, presence matters, and the ability to show up for your family, your work, and your calling for decades to come is what really matters. Leadership means reducing preventable risk whenever it's possible. You don't have to wait for a crisis to force a change, right? You can act early, you can act intentionally, and you build a life that reflects stewardship, discipline, and responsibility. So, I'm going to leave you with today's double-edged message. Your numbers are not random. They reflect accumulated stress, unregulated habits, and unaddressed responsibility. If your pressure is rising, it's a signal that something in your life requires ownership, not avoidance. That is it for today. If this episode added value, clarity, or even one push you needed, share it. Share it with someone new who needs to hear it. The only way we grow this podcast is when you guys share it. The more you share, the greater impact we can have around the world. And if you want 2026 to be the year that you perform, live at your highest level, head on over to rodmanuel.com. That's RODMANUEL.com, where you will find resources, coaching tools, and more to help you live, lead, and perform at your highest level. You can also order a copy of my book, Faith on Demand, which is also available on Amazon. And you will also have access to other exclusive content. And as I always say, be intentional with your words, be intentional with your thoughts, and be intentional with your actions. And always find a way to be a blessing to someone else today.